Does your novel feel flat, thin, or just plain too straightforward? You might be missing a subplot. If you're new here, I'm Holly Schindler, an award-winning author as well as freelance editor, writing coach, and writing instructor. Look, a subplot is never just filler. A subplot is going to add depth, emotional complexity, and meaning without hijacking your main storyline. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what a subplot is, what it's not, and how it can strengthen your book without detracting from the main storyline. Okay, what is a subplot? A subplot we know is more than a single scene. It is, in fact, its own storyline. It has its own beginning, middle, and end, and it runs parallel to the main storyline. A subplot is never going to directly determine whether or not that protagonist of yours actually achieves the macro goal of the book, right? Actually solves the main problem of the novel. But it is going to inform it. Okay, I'm sure all of this is clear as mud at this point. So let's grab an example here. Say you got a mystery, and it's a murder mystery, and the prime suspect is the victim's spouse. Now, your detective's macro goal, the main problem of this storyline, is simply solving the case. Now, as a side note, your book is also going to have micro goals, and I don't want you to confuse micro goals with a subplot. A micro goal is something, again, bigger than a scene, but is going to feed directly into your protagonist being able to achieve the macro goal of the book. So if we go back to our mystery example, say our detective needs to follow a money trail, right? He's exploring a money laundering angle in the process of solving this murder mystery. The information he gets from investigating this money trail is going to feed directly into his ability to solve who did it, right? It's going to feed into him being able to achieve this macro goal. Or maybe he's got a witness he wants to interview, right? It's going to take several scenes to track this witness down, interview them. But again, that information is going to feed directly into him being able to solve that case. Those are examples of micro goals. But what could a potential subplot be in this novel? Let's say maybe the detective's marriage is actually falling apart. Now, this storyline would run through, the majority of the novel, and it would have its own beginning, middle, and end. It would have its own problem. It would have its own tensions, stakes. There would be arguments maybe, or periods of reconciliation or separation. This is in fact its own storyline, running parallel to the detective trying to solve this case and figure out who committed this murder. Now, obviously, this subplot is not going to directly help the detective solve the case, right? Whatever happens in the detective's marriage, whether he fixes it or they completely go their separate ways, this has nothing to do with actually directly solving the case. This spouse of his is not bringing any clues to the table, doesn't know this person who died, doesn't know the spouse who is the prime suspect. The detective's own spouse has nothing directly to do with this case. But this experience of the detective's in his own personal life is going to shape how he views the case because, again, the prime suspect is the victim's spouse. So maybe this experience will make the detective more sympathetic to the spouse, could also make him more suspicious. It also maybe makes him more aware of how people hide truths inside a really close relationship. So that subplot doesn't solve the mystery, but it does deepen it. Sometimes the idea of what a subplot is can get clearer if you think about your own life being a novel. At any given time, you have several storylines running through your life all at once. You are always a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a son or daughter, right? All of these storylines are existing at the same time. But depending on what's going on in your life, there's always one storyline that's the dominant storyline. Say you went through a period of your life where you're trying to get a business open. You were trying to open a restaurant, right? Well, that storyline, you becoming an entrepreneur, opening a business, that was your macro goal at that point. That was your main storyline. The rest of the stories in your life didn't cease. You didn't stop being a parent, stop being a spouse. But those relationships and those storylines may have actually fed into some of your decisions and some of the ways in which you went about opening your restaurant. Maybe your role as a parent gave you ideas for what you wanted to put on the menu at your restaurant. Maybe your relationship with your spouse gave you ideas for what kind of hours you wanted to run in the restaurant, But regardless, that journey toward becoming a business owner was in fact your macro goal, it was your main storyline, and the rest of the stories going on in your life were your subplots. When you're trying to think about how to incorporate subplots into your own work, it can be really helpful to think in terms of opposites. If you've got an action-oriented work, can you insert an emotion-heavy storyline as a subplot? For example, if you've got a thriller, can you insert a romance subplot? Highlighting a completely different area of your main character's life is going to make that character feel richer, more fully developed, more lifelike. Your reader is going to find out that they have several different storylines running through their life, just like you do at any given time. And that subplot is going to help inform the main plot of the story. If that was helpful, you can always check out my Patreon for more writing tips, as well as free writing resources. Hope to catch you next time. In the meantime, go write something.